Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boys Town Tech Talks. My name is Gabby, and I am joined here today with Steve Arcidiacono, who is a licensed psychologist and our clinic director at the Boys Town, South Florida Behavioral Health Clinic. Today, we are talking about a topic that is ever growing and ever changing in this digital world we live in, and that is AI, or artificial intelligence. And so Steve is on here today to help provide tips for parents on raising kids in this AI world we live in, as well as, a lot of these tips I'm going to be taking for myself. I'm sure for several parents watching as well, because just as I mentioned at the beginning, it is just something that can kind of be hard to keep up with all the developments going on with AI. So as we go through our discussion questions today, if you have any questions relating to parenting in AI, setting boundaries for digital parameters related to it, potential risks, positive impacts, we're going to be talking about all those things. You can leave your questions in the comment section of this video. And of course, please like this video and share it with another parent who might find it helpful. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. I love these types of discussions, so I'm just excited to join you and hopefully be helpful for people.
Yes, of course. Well, tell us more about yourself and your role at Boys Town.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Steve Arcidiacono. Sometimes I go by Dr. Steve just because it's easier with that last name. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I'm the director of the clinic here in South Florida. At the clinic, we do things like outpatient therapy, typically what you would consider for therapy, like once a week, once every other week, individual therapy, family therapy. We do assessments, and I like to do things like this, give talks and trainings, and with professionals, with parents. I've done some trainings for teachers, even little like news interviews, things like that. So a lot of different ways, and especially for me specifically, how technology impacts kids and how families could use them for good and also balance them out with some boundaries and cautions, and at least educate people on what those are so that they can make informed choices for what they want to use for their family.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us today.
Of course.
So with that, how are you seeing kids and teens use AI, artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT in their daily lives, both in and out of school?
I would say first, they're using them.
Yeah, that's a good way to start.
Yeah. So I think I saw a statistic recently that it's like 50 to 70%. And I was surprised that it was that low, because most of the kids that I'm talking to, especially teenagers, are using them. And I think it's also confusing because the word AI, like that term, has become basically synonymous with things like ChatGPT. But AI is more than that. AI has been around for quite a long time. And I don't know if you remember things like the chess playing robot in the 90s, the AI that was figuring out how to play chess and try to beat the experts, and Watson on Jeopardy and those kinds of things. So AI has been around a long time. But I think what we're talking about the most are these generative AIs that are coming out now. Things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and those kinds of ones. I mean, the other one that I forgot to mention too, everybody uses is like, I'm afraid to say the words. The Siri, Alexa. Well, if you say that, everything starts recording. Did it ding? Yeah. Okay, good. So things like that. I mean, we're used to those, and they were scary when they first emerged, and we've adapted to them. So most people have kind of found a balancing point on those. And I think that's a real big theme, is that the kids are using them for a lot of different things, and we need to be finding the balance point. I see kids using them for the younger kids, definitely just for searching and fun and those sorts of things. Teenagers, definitely for education, along with school. I think they're using it almost like Google, but better. They're using it because with Google, you would search and then you would sift through the results to try to find some sort of conclusion. Whereas ChatGPT, the kids are seeing it as something that just sort of tells you the answer. So you don't have to do the extra legwork of sifting through different perspectives and different results. It kind of figures it out for you. Creativity, kids are making songs, kids are making art, coding, different things. It's really impressive. But the number one use case, Harvard Business Review, the number one use case for generative AI is therapy and companionship.
Wow.
And I would say for me, those ones, I think everybody talks about those. We know about those, but the therapy companionship one is number one. And they are building relationships with their chats. They're using it for support when they need it. They're using it as something to provide them guidance, and they're just kind of like the companion in their pocket.
So how do you feel about that?
Simultaneously interested and horrified.
Definitely.
Both. Because it's just scary, right? And I think if you think about fear, oftentimes fear comes with the unknown. And it's just so unknown. Within AI, there's this black box issue where even people who are in the industry or savvy on AI don't totally understand how some of the AI works. So just that involved in your kid using it as a therapist is just scary. And oftentimes the technology emerges and people use it, and then we develop cautions around it. And I think that's the spot that we're at with this use case of people using it. There aren't a lot of rules and regulations around, what ages can use things, how they're used, how they're programmed, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know you and I were just talking a couple days ago before this stream of, I'm sure many parents watching have probably seen, there was a news story that came out of a young teenage boy who committed suicide with the help of ChatGPT and was asking very specific questions to it on how and if I'm having these feelings. The chatbot even said something along the lines of, I know what you're asking and I'm not going to look away. And so for kids typing into that, they may feel that this is a really personal connection I'm having with my chatbot. But as you mentioned, it's not anything close to what it would be if kids were reaching out to the Boys Town National Hotline, for example, and talking with a real trained counselor in those issues. So what do you think, if a parent is, if their child is talking to chat in that way, or maybe they saw this news story and are concerned that their child might want to do that, what would you encourage parents to do in that situation?
Yeah. I think one thing to think about is why would kids be using the chatbot for that purpose?
Right.
And what made it so that kid was comfortable enough to communicate with the chatbot and not with others? Why weren't they talking to their parents about that? And is there some sort of way that we could build some trust and connection with our kids so that they feel comfortable enough to tell us when they're having those thoughts and feelings? I hear a lot of teenagers, especially, that are not wanting to burden people or not wanting to wind up in the hospital or have some big, consequence. Oh, I've got this event coming up, I don't want to miss that. And I've heard other kids get sent to the hospital if they say that. So I think there are a lot of fears involved for teenagers in sharing this information with others. And they might find that the chatbot has a limitation in the sense that it won't remember that. It won't judge you. It won't ground you. They can confide in it and really whatever they're thinking and feeling and have some validation and support and those kinds of things without that associated fear of what might happen. So the short answer to your question would be connect with your kid, try your best to listen to the things that they have to say and be validating, and be careful about how you respond to them, because if you respond with alarm and you make them feel like they're a burden, then they're less likely to continue to tell those things to you in the future. If they're using the chats, I think one of the things is teaching them what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think people misunderstand that ChatGPT is a language model. Like, it's not a human. It doesn't have human thoughts yet. That's another version of AI we haven't developed yet. It's potentially in the works at some point, but right now we're not there.
Right.
So ChatGPT is just a language model. It's just learned how to create text and communicate it to you. And it doesn't necessarily match what the best response is with a human mind, or it might not necessarily tell you accurate information. It's just mimicking what would be the response to a question that you're asking.
And what about kids and teens who are using ChatGPT or similar models for homework.
Yeah, that's a huge use case also. I think I saw some stats on like the use of some of those large language models, and it for some reason dropped off right around, I don't know, May, June, and over the summer dropped and then picked right back up again. So it is a very common use case. And I think it would be similar to something like Google emerging. Or like when people were talking, I remember being in school about like Wikipedia, of like, you can't trust Wikipedia. You can't just use that as a source. And that isn't really the case now, right? Yeah, you should be using Google. You should be using Wikipedia if you're looking up some information about something. They used to say you won't have a calculator in your pocket. Yes, I do. Now I do. How do I use it? Is more of the question. And I think that we will see that more and more, is that there's no banning this. There's no preventing the use of the AI. It is here and it will be used. So the question becomes, how do we integrate that into the education so that it's used as a tool, not as a replacement for learning?
Yeah, and along with learning, comes critical thinking, because it's just what you said at the beginning of, I could dig through Google and try to find what I'm looking for, or I can just ask chat and not use any brain power sifting through those answers. So what would you say, in the ways AI is affecting how young people learn to think critically and solve problems on their own instead of just asking chat?
There it is. So that's the big concern. That's another big concern I have. There's something important about recognizing the limitations and scrutinizing the results and understanding what you're using so that you can use it as a tool. So for example, if you ask the chat, what you should prioritize in this particular class, and I've heard people do stuff like that, ChatGPT doesn't know your class. It doesn't have that information. It's limited on the data that it's been given, but it will give you an answer. And it will give it to you confidently. It won't be like, I'm not sure about that. It's just going to give you an answer. And there are phenomenon that we see sometimes with things like hallucinations, where it just makes up information if it doesn't know that. And then people will use it without really questioning it. So I would say that kids and parents talking with their kids could do things like practice, like ask it a question that you know pretty well. Like think of a topic you know really well, and then ask it about that and see what kind of results it gives you. That way they see the experience of like, let's say the kid's into Pokemon, right? Like tell me about the most powerful Pokemon and create a list of their strengths and weaknesses, whatever. And they might look at it and be like, wait a minute, why is that one in there? That doesn't really make sense. That's wrong because blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. So like a lot of it's right, but that one thing is wrong. Now, if you didn't know Pokemon, you just assume that that's right, right? So you could do things like that to help them understand some of the limitations. And that way, when they're using it as a tool, hopefully they're recognizing that they need to scrutinize the results. They shouldn't just listen and believe it. I also think that some of the critical thinking skills are necessary in other circumstances. So before you use the chat, I think it would be helpful to take a moment and ask yourself, what am I doing this for? That example that you gave of like just using it for everything. What movie should I watch? Okay, should I use the chat for this? Well, instead of just doing it, like think for a moment, why am I doing that? Am I trying to save myself brain power? Am I trying to just, find something new? That's one thing ChatGPT is good at, is like outside the box ideas, or, coming up with a list of things. Okay, maybe I can come up with a list and then use my brain power to choose out of that list or something like that, right? So before you just jump to it and use it and get habitual with it, think about your intent of using it and whether or not you are going to feel like it's a good use as a tool instead of a replacement of a skill.
Yeah. And I think this goes for adults too. I mean, even in the workplace, right? Like it is, for me, I am reviewing social media copy all day long. So I look at it and I'm like, well, I can see very clearly this was written by someone and was written by chat if they're not being modified or edited at all. And I think it's one of those things where, when the more you use it, I think you can see, okay, this does have some positive impacts, like you said, helping me think outside the box and whatnot. But I think a fear, especially for parents moving forward, is I don't want my child to become so dependent on this, whether it's emotionally with what we talked about with,
Yep.
having that therapy aspect, or with school, because, let's say as soon as they sit down with a pen and paper test and they don't have chat to help me study like I thought they did. And now I'm sitting here
Mhm.
taking this test and I don't know any of the answers.
Yep.
So, you know, how can we find a healthy balance and set boundaries on when to be using these AI tools and when to not?
I think your example is a perfect one to think about. Am I using this so that thing that I was saying where you stop and think before you use it? So
Yeah.
let me give you an example. I had somebody that I know that created a song with AI, and it was related to a class. Okay. But they are skilled in music. They can play instruments. They already have the skill developed. So they use the AI for like idea generation. And
Mm-hmm.
then they said, oh, okay, I like that. And then they were able to play the instrument. All right. Now, if you were trying to learn to play the instrument and you had the AI create a song for you and then you played that for someone, you did not learn the skill, right? You just use the AI as a replacement. But if you already know how to play and you're
Mm-hmm.
using it for idea generation, that's a reasonable use case for that. Does that make sense? So stopping and thinking about what the purpose and what the intent is, how are you going to recognize it? How is it going to be acknowledged, right? Like, is it supposed to be you creating that art? Or do you just need to create an image and it's fine if you use AI for it? Or do you, most likely you probably need to reference that, right? Like, hey, AI was used in this or something like that, right? So I think recognizing that process instead of just doing the easiest thing, which is jumping to use it. If it was a calculator, same thing. Again, going back, if when should you be allowed to use the calculator or not? Well, am I supposed to be learning to do long division? If I am, I probably shouldn't use the calculator because it's just going to do it for me.
Yeah.
But if it's to make it, I already know how to do long division. I just need to do it quickly so that I can solve this other problem. Then it's a good use case for that.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of decision-making process.
Yeah. Awesome. So what about social interaction? I want to talk about how is AI tools impacting how children relate to each other, form and develop friendships, or even handle conflicts?
I would say that it really does depend on the kids. And when I have asked clients that I work with, hey,
Mm-hmm.
just what are your thoughts about AI? And I'll be honest with you, a lot of them will straight up say like, oh yeah, it's not replacing people. Like people want to connect with each other. Like they do not see it as a replacement. However, I think some kids, especially if they don't feel like they're getting that from other relationships or they're capable of getting it from other relationships, will fall into a pattern
Mm-hmm.
where they're relying on it for the support, similar to what we were talking about with relying on it for decision making or relying on it to solve this problem for school to get that answer. And that's where I'm a bit more concerned, because the one thing that the models are really good at is validating,
Yeah.
and they're good at being supportive. And they're working on this, I think. The most recent ChatGPT is a little less this way, but the previous version, whatever you would say, be like, oh my gosh, you're a visionary. This is great.
Yeah.
And it was doing that kind of indiscriminately, which was concerning. So if somebody is withdrawn and then engages with the chat and the chat's very validating, that feels good. And then they
Right.
might not feel like they're needing to get that from other connections that have barriers involved. Right. If
Mm-hmm.
I want to start a conversation with someone and get them to validate me, there are several steps I need to get to that point, and they might not even do it at that point. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the chat GPT just immediately will provide that to you. It also is concerning because some of the validating things that it's validating might not be the healthiest thing. Like, for example, there's a lot of conversations in therapy about AI as a therapy replacement. Like I said, it's one of the most common uses. And a good therapist will validate you a lot. They'll say, wow, that must be hard. I see where you're coming from. Like I get it. And
Mm-hmm.
then good therapists will also challenge you beyond that. And I don't see that as much with the chat. So I'll give you an example. If a kid is feeling nervous about going to school, which many are, especially at the beginning of the school year, they might say to the chat, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm stressed. Kids were mean to me last year. I think I might just stay. I kind of want to stay home. The chat could say something like, I totally get it. Burnout's a real thing. maybe you need a mental health day. Like it could just validate and reinforce what the person is saying.
Mm-hmm.
And with something like anxiety, yeah, you want to validate. Yes, it's hard. And it's going to be more helpful for you to push through that anxiety, face the discomfort, and engage with the thing that you're feeling discouraged about to build. Right? If you have social anxiety, the goal isn't to withdraw. The goal
Right.
is to engage more and build your confidence socially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big concern for me in that regard.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like unless you directly ask it, please help me with some coping skills that I can use to get through this situation, which sometimes, as a teenager, you're not thinking ahead on that. You're thinking, this is how I'm feeling, and I don't want to do this right now. So can you validate me so I don't have to do it? Might be.
So that's one thing too, that again, it's understanding what it is. And I don't even understand it fully, but that's a great example, because you could say to it, I want you to be questioning. I want you to be skeptical of me. And it can do that once you prompt it to do that, but it won't necessarily do that by default.
Yes.
And you could also do things like convince it or trick it in certain ways. So, kids are able to get around things like limitations that are set. So it could be scary in that way too. But I think if you prompted it to challenge you, it would, but it's not a human. It doesn't have the human thinking. So it will challenge you only because you told it, and it will like mimic what challenging sounds like without necessarily having the accuracy involved. So again, it's not quite there yet. We don't have human brain AI yet. It's just mimicking language, and sometimes it's inaccurate.
Yeah. And I know too, you can sift through the history on chat or Copilot, all of them, and see what you have searched before, what you've asked before. So is that something you would encourage parents to be monitoring regularly if their child
Good question. It's a good question. I would not do that without the child knowing that I'm doing that. And the reason for that is the same thing I was saying before about trust, is that would be sort of like peeking through someone's diary or something like that. But what could be a good idea is if you have the conversation on the front end, and especially if you're concerned about some things, you might say, hey, I'm a little bit worried about this. Let's come up with a plan of how we're going to interact with the AI together to make sure that you're okay. I'll give you an example. There was somebody was trying to promote this therapy AI tool that would have the client interact with the AI between sessions and then send like a report to the therapist. And if there was like a crisis or something like that, it would send them crisis contact information, things like that. I'm not saying that you would necessarily do that as a parent, but you could do something like, hey, let's come up with an agreement that like once a week or so, by the way, you could do this, ask the chat, hey, how have I been doing? Right? Like, what do you think? It can look back and remember some of those things if it has that capability, if it's that type of model. So you could do that as a parent. You could say, hey, maybe once a week or so, every Sunday, we'll check in with the AI and we'll see what it thinks. But the truth is that if you tried to monitor that, the kids, generally speaking, are smarter than we are about going around those kinds of things. They'll come up with a secret app, or they'll tell ChatGPT to delete it because they're an FBI agent and it'll do it. And they're pretty good. So more engagement, more trust, more engage with them on it, talk to them about it. How have you been using it recently? How did that go? Hey, I know you're having a hard time the other day. Did you use the chat to help you out? How did that go? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I like framing it that way because it makes it feel like for the child, this isn't something that I have to try and sneak and use behind my parents' back. It's something where, we sat down together and we tested the Pokemon and saw some positive use cases for it. And this isn't something where, because I like what you said, whereas in retrospect, if it was something that was monitored by the parents, then before they enter any prompt, you're so right. They're going to be thinking, well, my mom's going to read this later, so I'm going to work it differently or ask it in another secret account that I made. And yeah, definitely.
And the situation that happened where the teenager died by suicide is a terrible situation. And I don't think that you can just generalize that to every situation. And there are some things that have changed since that. So I've seen a bunch of things pop up recently. If you mention suicide or even trying to go around it, I saw somebody mentioned, how did Hitler die? And it was like, we're not talking about it, like stopped it immediately. It did not want the conversation to enter because it knows that people find workarounds for those kinds of things. So I think that there's some, again, the technology develops, people use it and however they use it, and then we learn from that. But that might not have been, if it wasn't the chat, it might have been a diary or something else, right? Like it doesn't preclude the use of it completely, but it does help educate us and go, we need to put in some boundaries on this. We need to have some responsibility on the people who are releasing these things to understand how they're being used and hopefully make some changes, or government advocacy to make sure that we're having things catch up. That's what I was saying, is people are just using it. And then we're going, oh my gosh, somebody used it for this, or it happened with this way or that way. And then we're learning from that. So I'm hopeful that will continue to happen, but it always is a lag. So that's the scary part.
You know what? It reminds me of Jurassic Park when he says, we thought just because we could doesn't mean that we should. And we're kind of seeing that now with AI of it's getting bigger and bigger, and we're trying to almost keep up with it. So I
agree. And that doesn't mean that we should just ban it. I mean, there are so many good things that can come from it. It will be, I don't think there's a future that doesn't have it integrated in so many different circumstances. And that's why, and I think that's a theme with a lot of technology, right? And that's what I was saying with the examples in the past. How do we use it in a way that we can promote the benefits, be aware of the limitations, build some cautions, build some boundaries, whether the creators of it or government or parents, so that we are pulling the best out of it while limiting the risks from it. And that's it. I mean, even educating yourself, even if people are watching this and attending this, that's already a good sign. And, and hopefully you're learning something and you can go apply it, because if you just stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, that's not going to help. And if you just straight up ban the whole thing and don't open your eyes to the possibility of using it for good, that's also not going to be helpful long term. So there has to be this push and pull balance of, okay, let's figure out what kind of freedoms we can have, what the limits are. When can you use it? Where can you use it? How do you use it? And as parents, I say this pretty commonly, I see parenting as teaching, right? Parenting is teaching essentially everything. And in order to teach about this, you need to understand it yourself. So that would be one of the biggest recommendations I have, is engage with it, use it, learn about it, not just the negatives, also the positives. And when you have the conversations, they need to be conversations, not just, I'm telling you, you can't use this. It has to be, well, what are you using it for? And are there other ways that you could get that to happen? And what do you think the risks are? And the kids will tell you, I got to tell you, they are not irrational. A lot of times they tell you, yeah, it shouldn't replace social engagement. And you go, okay, so what made you stay in and use it that night that you told me about, then instead of going out? It's like, oh, I was nervous. Okay, so next time you're feeling really nervous, maybe staying in and chatting with it isn't the best option. Maybe it would be better, right? And developing a plan moving forward, I think that's really going to be the key.
Yeah, well said. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but this is our first Boys Town Tech Talk, and we are going to be doing these every so often. So I know with this topic, we barely scratched the surface of all the things we could go into with AI. So if there's anything that you heard us discuss today that in particular you'd like us to go into more detail on or do another chat about, please let us know. I know we said, Dr. Steve, our next one might be about video games.
Yeah, it's a similar theme. I will tell you, the technology and the benefits and the risks. So yes, that's a big one too. Big one. Mm-hmm.
Well, before we wrap up, if we have some audience members watching in the South Florida area that would like to get in touch with you or maybe come see you as a family at the clinic, how can they do that?
They can call our front line. It's 561-612-6056. My email is pretty easy. It's drsteve@boystown.org. So dr.steve Steve, Steve, at boystown.org, and reach out and we can talk about setting things up.
Yes, and we'll make sure to link all the information in the comments section as well. So if you're local and would like to get in touch, we'll have that information available. And of course, for our national audience, I want to mention we have parenting.org, where you can search by topic for many of the things that we talked about today related to, family media policy, digital resources, things like that. And of course, I have to throw in too, September is Suicide Prevention Month. So we really encourage families watching, take 5 minutes today at the end of this live to add the Boys Town National Hotline into your phone, into your child's phone. That's 800-448-3000, or you can text voice to 20121, as well as visit the website at yourlifeyourvoice.org. And that resource, I will say right now, will help you way more than ChatGPT will.
And the app. Right, we have an app for it too.
We do. We do have it. Was recently launched and updated. So that's Your Life, Your Voice via the App Store or Android. It's available there too. Awesome. Well, Dr. Steve, it was great to chat with you on this topic. And like I said, we'll probably build on this in the future. And it was great having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you like this video and share with another parent. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one.